Ja Rule didn't just rise fast, he fell even faster. But his downfall didn't start with 50 Cent or the feds. It began with a choice he made as a kid, one that followed him into fame and blew everything apart.
Because I couldn't react to that situation. The fire just got bigger and bigger and bigger because he kept fanning it and I really couldn't put it out.
And once you hear what that choice really cost him, Ja Rule's entire story looks completely different from Queen's Kingpin. Now, before we dive into what went wrong, before we talk about the beefs, the prison sentences, the financial disasters, and yes, that festival, we need to understand just how high this man climbed. Because you cannot truly appreciate the magnitude of a fall unless you first understand the dizzying heights from which someone tumbled. Ja Rule was born on February 29, 1976 in Hollis, Queens, New York, a neighborhood that would become legendary in hip-hop history as the birthplace of icons like Run DMC and LL Cool J. But unlike the suburban comfort those names might suggest, young Jeffrey's early years were marked by chaos, instability, and an absence that would shape everything he became. His father, William Adkins, was a ghost who left permanent scars.
My dad was real abusive, and so, it was real crazy, real dark. And I got to see, things that, really hurt me because it was the pain of my mom and, that type of...
William abandoned the family when Jeffrey was approximately 5 years old, leaving behind nothing but memories of volatility and one vivid moment that would stick with young Jeffrey forever. A trip to a local pizza spot where a stranger reached for his slice, prompting his father to smash a bottle over the man's head.
It was protection, yes, but it was also a preview of the violence that permeated William's existence.
Before his ultimate disappearance, after his father's departure, Jeffrey was sent to live with his maternal grandparents, devout Jehovah's Witnesses who ran a strict household in Hollis. His grandparents' home sat on 2 and 8th Street in Hollis, Queens. And for a young boy navigating the trauma of an absent father, the structure of the Kingdom Hole became both a shelter and a prison. He attended services 5 days a week, immersed in the doctrine strictures, until something unexpected emerged from that rigid religious upbringing.
At a young age, at like 8, 9, 10 years old, I'm speaking in front of crowds of people, public speaking, which helped me become those things, I guess, fear, getting over fear of a crowd or whatever. It started right there.
The Jehovah's Witnesses had, without intending to, trained a future superstar by putting young Jeffrey on stage at 8, 9, 10 years old to deliver speeches before congregations of hundreds. They had eliminated the very fear that paralyzes most performers. They had given him the gift of presence. But the religion that gave him confidence would also tear his family apart. When Jeffrey was 12 years old, his mother, Deborah, was disfellowshipped from the congregation, excommunicated, cast out, banished from contact with other members, including her own parents.
They banished my mother and my grandparents sat me down and it was like, yeah, your mother's not gonna be able to come on the weekends and do her visits anymore.
How did that make you feel?
In that moment, I feel like in that moment is when I became quote unquote a man because I made the decision to leave my comfortable surroundings and go with my mother.
At 12 years old, Jeffrey chose his mother over comfort, over stability, over the only structured life he had ever known. He walked away from his grandparents' nice house with grass in the yard and followed Deborah into uncertainty, apartments they couldn't afford, evictions, moving from place to place, scraping by on whatever they could manage. This decision plunged them into financial hardship, and it bred in young Jeffrey a bitterness toward organized religion that would never fully heal. He developed what he called a one-on-one with God, a personal faith untethered from institutions that in his eyes had abandoned his mother for the crime of being human. And so, untethered from the guardrails of religious structure and grappling with the realities of poverty in Queens, Jeffrey turned to the streets. By his early teens, around age 12, he began selling crack cocaine to make ends meet, a detail he would later rap about candidly and discuss openly in interviews. He was arrested at 16 for gun and drug possession, serving time that gave him an early education and consequences. But even as the streets pulled at him, hip-hop was calling louder. He dropped out in the 11th grade, convinced that his talent was the only thing that could lift him to different heights. He dove into the culture completely, breakdancing under the alias Kid Fresh, spinning records as a DJ, tagging walls with graffiti, and scribbling rhymes inspired by NWA's gritty realism. In 1994, at 18 years old, Jeffrey formed the short-lived group Cash Money Click with childhood friends O1 and Chris Black, a name completely unrelated to Birdman's New Orleans label. They released indie singles like Get the Fortune and gained underground traction on pirate radio and Yo MTV Raps.
But when Chris Black was arrested for drug dealing and sentenced to 5 years in prison in 1995, the group dissolved and Jeffrey found himself at a crossroads. What saved him was a connection he had made through Black, a producer named Irving Lorenzo, better known as Irv Gotti, who would become the architect of Ja Rule's empire. Gotti saw something in the young Queens rapper, a raw hunger mixed with an unusual ability to blend hardcore street narratives with melodic hooks. The pivotal break came in 1995 when Ja Rule appeared on Mike Geronimo's Time to Build, a posse cut that united him with future legends Jay-Z and DMX. It was a statement. Ja Rule could hold his own among the best. Then came 1998, and the moment that would change everything. Ja Rule wrote and performed the hook on Jay-Z's Can I Get Up from Volume 2, Hard Knock Life. The song was a massive hit, reaching number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100 and getting heavy play from its placement in the film Rush Hour. The industry took notice. The kid from Hollis who had chosen his outcast mother over religion, who had sold crack to survive, who had dropped out of school believing in nothing but his talent, that kid was about to become a superstar. In 1999, Ja Rule released his debut album, Veni Vedi Veci, which debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 with 184,000 first-week sales and was certified platinum. The single, Holla Holla, peaked at number 35 on the Hot 100. And suddenly, Ja Rule wasn't just a Queens rapper, he was a force, but he was only getting started. Rule 336, released in 2000, debuted at number 1 with 276,000 units sold and went triple platinum. Hits like Between Me and You and Put It On Me dominated radio, showcasing his signature blend of thuggish vocals and R&B sensibility. And then came 2001, the year Ja Rule reached the absolute pinnacle of hip-hop success. Pain Is Love debuted at number 1 with 361,000 first-week sales and spawned 4 top 10 smashes, including the number 1 hit Always On Time featuring Ashanti. He also appeared on Jennifer Lopez's remixes of I'm Real and Ain't It Funny, both reaching number 1 on the Hot 100. By 2002, Ja Rule had moved over 30 million records worldwide. He was hip-hop's crossover king, earning Grammy nominations, American Music Award nods, and landing acting roles in films like The Fast and the Furious. He had transcended the streets of Hollis to become a global phenomenon. He was quite simply untouchable, or so it seemed, because in the shadows, a rivalry was brewing. A beef that would start over Queen Street politics and escalate into one of the most destructive feuds in hip-hop history. A beef that would ultimately contribute to the unraveling of everything Ja Rule had built. The name of his nemesis, Curtis Jackson. The world would know him as 50 Cent, the beef that broke an empire. If you want to understand how Ja Rule went from selling 30 million records to becoming a cultural punchline, you have to understand one thing above all else. The beef with 50 Cent wasn't just a rivalry, it was a systematic dismantling. The clash between Ja Rule and 50 Cent ignited around 1999 in Southside Jamaica, Queens. Two artists from the same ecosystem who would become bitter enemies. The exact origin depends on who's telling the story, and both men have offered vastly different accounts over the years. A dude that I knew that I with from Southside came home from jail, so he's like, yo, you was my girl while I was up north, this, that, and the third. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So he proceeds to say, yo, give me your chain. Ja Rule's version centers on a personal dispute. A man named Troy who robbed him at gunpoint over a woman, a chain taken under duress that was later recovered by mutual acquaintances. And Ja's telling 50 Cent had nothing to do with the actual incident, but later used it as ammunition. 50 Cent, however, claimed in his 2005 memoir From Pieces to Weight that a friend of his committed the robbery, and that Ja spotted 50 clubbing with the culprit weeks later, igniting the tension. Whatever the truth, the fuse was lit. In late 1999 or 2000, an Atlanta nightclub brawl erupted between the two camps.
Chains broke in the scuffle, and the confrontation became physical. Then came the incident that escalated everything beyond words. In March 2000, Ja Rule and members of his crew, including an associate named Black Child, confronted 50 Cent at New York's Hit Factory Studios. A brawl ensued, and 50 was stabbed in the arm. Ja Rule and Black Child were arrested. Black Child claimed self-defense. The wound wasn't life-threatening, but it became a permanent talking point, proof in 50's narrative that Ja Rule's crew played dirty. When we had our altercation in Atlanta, that's what that was. When we had our altercation at the Hit Factory, that's what that was. What am I taking credit for? I never said I shot you. For a while, the beef simmered beneath the surface. Ja Rule was at the peak of his commercial success, selling millions of records while 50 Cent was still building his reputation on the mixtape circuit. But everything changed in 2002 when 50 signed with Eminem's Shady Records and Dr. Dre's Aftermath, suddenly gaining access to the most powerful promotional machinery in hip-hop.
"50 Cent's mixtape No Mercy, No Fear dropped in August 2002, featuring Wankster, a track inspired by Ja Rule, which became a breakout hit, reaching number 13 on the Hot 100. The G-Unit mixtape, The Future Is Now, unleashed I Smell, a vicious attack naming Ja Rule, Irv Gotti, Black Child, and Cadillac Ta, complete with skits parodying Ja's singing style. And then came February 6, 2003. The day that arguably sealed Ja Rule's commercial fate. 50 Cent's debut album, Get Rich or Die Trying, entered the Billboard 200 at number 1 with 872,000 first-week sales. The Dr. Dre produced Back Down eviscerated Ja Rule and Murder Inc.'s street credibility. Ja Rule fired back with everything he had. In April 2003, he released Loose Change, targeting 50 Cent, G-Unit, Eminem, Dr. Dre, and Busta Rhymes. Lines so inflammatory they included personal attacks on Eminem's daughter and homophobic slurs aimed at Dr. Dre and 50 Cent. Eminem and Busta Rhymes responded with Hail Mary in May 2003, a devastating track that revamped Tupac's original and mocked Dawes' obsession with imitating Pac's style. Listen, man, you know what I'm saying? You entertain clowns, you become a part of the circus. But perhaps what damaged Ja Rule most wasn't just the diss tracks, it was his inability to respond effectively during a critical period. The 2003 FBI raid on Murder Inc.'s offices, probing alleged money laundering and drug ties to Kenneth Supreme McGriff, created a legal cloud that paralyzed Ja Rule's ability to fight back publicly. While 50 Cent kept fanning the flames, Ja Rule's lawyers were telling him to stay quiet. Because I couldn't react to that situation, the fire just got bigger and bigger and bigger because he kept fanning it and I really couldn't respond. I couldn't put it out. In November 2003, Ja Rule released Blood in My Eye, a beef-centric album that represented a complete pivot from his R&B rap hybrid formula. It debuted at number 6, but sold only 84,000 copies in its first week, a catastrophic decline from his prior platinum runs. Critics savaged it, and fans who had loved his melodic hits weren't interested in pure aggression. The tide had turned, and it wasn't coming back. The federal investigation into Murder Inc. continued with a January 2005 superseding indictment charging multiple associates with racketeering, narcotics trafficking, and laundering over $1 million. Though Ja Rule himself was never charged, the scrutiny froze Def Jam's support, delayed releases, and cost millions in lost revenue. By 2005, Universal declined to renew the distribution deal, effectively folding Murder Inc. into a skeleton operation. And 50 Cent? He was just getting started with the trolling. In 2004, 50 Cent trolled Ja Rule at Hot 97 Summer Jam by projecting his face on screen and awarding him a mock Grammy for Wackest Rapper. The humiliation was complete, public broadcasted to thousands. Inescapable Ja Rule's legal troubles only compounded the damage. On July 27, 2007, after performance at Manhattan's Beacon Theater, NYPD stopped his Lamborghini for an expired inspection sticker. Officers smelled marijuana, searched the vehicle, and found a loaded .40 caliber Glock pistol under the back seat. On December 13, 2010, facing up to 15 years of convicted at trial, Ja Rule pleaded guilty to attempted second-degree criminal possession of a weapon.
But there was more. In October 2010, federal prosecutors in Newark indicted Ja Rule for tax evasion, alleging he failed to file returns that paid taxes on over $3 million in income from 2004 to 2006. On March 22, 2011, he pleaded guilty to 3 felony counts and was sentenced to 28 months in federal prison plus full restitution of over $1 million. Ja Rule surrendered to Rikers Island on June 8, 2011, beginning a sentence that would keep him locked up until May 2013. While inside, he earned his GED in February 2012, a milestone he celebrated as personal growth, and was baptized as a born-again Christian alongside his wife, Aisha. At the end of the day, I've never been beat up. I've never been stabbed up. I've never been shot up. You know what I'm saying? These are all the things that happened to him. When he emerged from prison, the world had moved on. His 2012 album, Pain Is Love 2, bombed with 18,000 first-week sales, peaking at number 197 on the Billboard 200. The momentum was gone. The brand was tarnished. And 50 Cent was still there, still trolling, still winning. By 2005, Ja Rule appeared on Hot 97 and made a rare admission: "We lost the war." A moment of candor that seemed to close the chapter. But this beef would never truly die. In 2018, 50 Cent bought 200 front-row tickets, approximately $3,000 total, to Ja Rule's Vegas show, leaving them empty as a power move. Ja Rule called 50 a parasite and cancer to the culture. The barbs continued through social media, through interviews, through every possible platform. And yet, even with all the beef, all the legal troubles, all the commercial decline, there was still one more disaster waiting for Ja Rule, one more humiliation that would cement his legacy not as a hip-hop legend, but as a meme. It was called Fyre Festival, and it would become the most infamous party that never happened. Fire, fury, and the fight for redemption.
If the beef with 50 Cent cracked the foundation of Ja Rule's empire, then Fyre Festival demolished it entirely, leaving behind wreckage so spectacular, so perfectly symbolic of hubris meeting incompetence, that it transcended hip-hop to become a cultural phenomenon unto itself. The story begins not with a festival, but with an app. In October 2015, shortly after his release from prison, Ja Rule partnered with Billy McFarland, a 24-year-old serial entrepreneur with a track record of flashy but flawed adventures. Together, they co-founded Fyre Media Inc., initially pitching it as a talent booking app to disrupt the live events industry. The app was struggling, buggy, underperforming, hemorrhaging money, so McFarland pivoted. Why not create a signature event to market the app? A luxury music festival in the Bahamas that would generate so much buzz, so much FOMO, that downloads would explode. Ja Rule's role was pivotal from the start. As the creative force, he infused the project with hip-hop credibility, envisioning it as immersive and transformational. He was hands-on in scouting locations, flying with McFarland to Norman's Cay, a remote Exuma island once owned by a Medellin cartel operative, to film promotional footage that would become infamous. On December 12, 2016, Fyre Media orchestrated a synchronized influencer drop. Over 400 celebrities, models, and tastemakers posted the same video simultaneously. Women in bikinis stepping off a private jet onto white sands, boarding speedboats, lounging in paradise. The video amassed 300 to 400 million views in days, crashing Instagram servers briefly. Key influencers were handsomely paid. Kendall Jenner received $275,000 for a single post. Emily Ratajkowski, Bella Hadid, and dozens more from Victoria's Secret and Sports Illustrated followed suit. Tickets sold out in 48 hours, grossing approximately $14 million. Prices range from $500 for general admission to $12,000 for VIP Firestarter packages, promising private jet transfers, luxury villas, and gourmet meals by celebrity chefs. But behind the glossy marketing, chaos reigned. McFarland ignored warnings from consultants that a festival of this scale required at least $50 million and 18 to 24 months of preparation. Instead, he budgeted approximately $10 to $15 million, assuming lean operations would suffice. When the original location fell through just 4 months before the event, they scrambled to relocate to Roker's Point, a dusty airport-adjacent field near Great Exuma with no infrastructure, no stages, no sanitation, no reliable power. On April 27, 2017, the first weekend kicked off amid heavy rains that soaked the site.
Charter flights fed approximately 1,400 attendees from Miami, far short of the projected 5,000. But delays mounted. One flight circled for hours before landing at 4 in the morning. What greeted the arrivals was apocalyptic. The luxury accommodations were soggy FEMA tents with dirt floors and moldy mattresses. The gourmet meals were styrofoam trays of wilted cheese sandwiches and soggy salads. No running water, insufficient toilets, dim lighting, and zero medical staff. Blink-182 pulled out hours before via Twitter, citing inadequate preparations, followed by the rest of the lineup. Real-time reactions captured the horror. #Fyre Fraud trended globally as attendees posted videos of the chaos, fights breaking out, people sleeping on the tarmac, influencers fleeing to overbooked resorts. McFarland was arrested on June 1, 2017 at his NYC apartment. He eventually pleaded guilty to 2 wire fraud counts and was sentenced on October 11, 2018 to 6 years in prison in order to forfeit $26 million. And Ja Rule? A $100 million class action lawsuit named him for fraud and breach of contract. He maintained throughout that he was a victim too, tweeting apologies, claiming McFarland defrauded him of $3 to $5 million in personal investments. "Not a scam, I'm taking responsibility," he posted, attempting damage control. In November 2019, Ja Rule was cleared. The judge ruled his promotions didn't directly cause ticket purchases, but the reputational damage was done. 2 documentaries, Netflix's Fyre, The Greatest Party That Never Happened, and Hulu's Fyre Fraud, both released in January 2019, immortalized the debacle for millions of viewers. Ja Rule became the face of influencer-era fraud, the hype man who had either been duped or complicit in one of the most elaborate promotional disasters in modern history. The memes were relentless. The jokes never stopped. And 50 Cent? He photoshopped Ja Rule as Trump's Secretary of Festivals, continuing his 2-decade campaign of humiliation. When McFarland announced Fyre Festival 2 for 2025, Ja Rule immediately distanced himself. "We're not going to be there." He had learned, perhaps too late, that some associations cannot be rehabilitated. But here's the thing about Ja Rule. He refuses to disappear.
At 49 years old in 2025, with a net worth estimated at approximately $4 million, a far cry from his $30 million peak, he's still hustling, still touring, still building. In 2021, he completed a Harvard Business School certificate program in Entrepreneurship Essentials, tweeting his accomplishment with pride from the streets to Harvard. He launched Icon Live, a streaming platform designed as a free speech haven for creators. He entered the spirits business with Rosevine Cellars Wine in 2023 and Amber and Opal Whiskey in January 2025. Ventures he promotes personally at bottle signings and club appearances. And perhaps most significantly, he's turned to philanthropy. Through a partnership with Pencils of Promise, Ja Rule funded a 6-unit classroom block at Nuwaso Anglican Primary School in Ghana's eastern region, donating approximately $70,000 for a facility that opened in April 2025. Over 100 children now have modern learning spaces because the man once known for cheese sandwich disasters chose to build something real. His 2025 Where the Party At tour with Nelly, Eve, and Chingy spanned 54 dates across New Zealand,